Michael Collins was born on the 16th of October 1890 at Woodfield Farm near Sam's Cross, a few miles west of Clonakilty. The Collins family were tenant farmers and had lived at Woodfield for at least 6 generations. As a young man, his father, Michael Collins Sr., had received a good education in a hedge school and had survived the hardships of the famine. Influenced by O'Donovan Rossa and others, he had also joined the Fenians. He was 60 years of age when he married Marianne O'Brien, almost 40 years his junior. They had 8 children, of whom Michael was the youngest. In 1903, Collins moved to Clonakilty National School, where in school days he lodged with his sister Margaret and her husband, Patrick O'Driscoll, at their house in Emmett Square. At the age of about 15, Collins applied for the post office clerk exams in London, which he passed, and the following year found himself in Kensington, London, where he would stay for 10 years and where he lived with his sister Hanny. He continued his studies there and also joined the Gaelic Athletic Association. Through his work in the GAA, he soon met other nationalists and quickly became a member of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, the IRB, a group whose predecessors included the United Irishmen and other Fenian organisations. Collins also managed to enjoy a social life during this busy period. In London, his involvement with the GAA introduced him to a wide social circle. Several of these people also moved back to Ireland around the same time as Collins.
After 10 years living and working in London, Collins returned to Ireland in 1916 to participate in the Easter Rising. The Rising was a rebellion against British rule in Ireland, in which members of the Irish Volunteers occupied several strategically important buildings in Dublin city centre, along with a couple of other smaller skirmishes throughout the country. Collins at this point in time was a staff captain in the Irish Volunteers, and he was stationed in the GPO, the General Post Office in Dublin, which was the headquarters of the Rising, where Michael served as aide-de-camp to Joseph Mary Plunkett, one of the leaders of the rebellion and one of the signatories of the proclamation of the Irish Republic. In the aftermath of the rebellion, 16 individuals, including key leaders such as Sean McDermott, Thomas Clarke, Patrick Pearse and James Connolly, were executed. These executions encouraged the tide of public opinion to shift in favour of the rebels and the rebellion. Now, people often ask us, why wasn't Michael Collins executed in the aftermath of the Rising? And the simple answer is, Michael Collins at this point in time is still relatively unknown. Rather than being executed, Michael was interned in Fronguk in Wales, this internment camp that had previously been used to house German prisoners of war during the First World War. It's within the confines of Fronguk that Collins really starts to showcase his organisational abilities and his assertive personality. And it's here in the post-Rising period that he starts his rise to power, so to speak, in many respects brought about by the power vacuum created by the execution of the Rising's leaders. Throughout 1917 and 1918, Collins continues to reorganise both wings of the revolutionary movement, both the political and the military. During this period, he canvasses during pivotal by-elections and is also elected onto the Executive Committee of Sinn Féin. In the general election of December 1918, Michael is elected to Parliament as a representative for the constituency of Cork South. Now, the stated aim of Sinn Féin at this time was that if elected in this general election, they wouldn't take their seats in Westminster, but instead would establish their own parliament in Dublin, Dáil Éireann. On the 21st of January then, 1919, Dáil Éireann meets for the first time in the Mansion House in Dublin, and Michael Collins is made Minister for Home Affairs. In April, Collins is transferred from Home Affairs to the Department of Finance, and it's as Minister for Finance that he really excels. During this period, he organises and orchestrates the Dáil Loan, this massive bond scheme that essentially funded the revolutionary government throughout the War of Independence. The Irish War of Independence is conventionally seen as beginning on the 21st of January 1919 because the first sitting of Dáil Éireann coincided with the Sullow Headbeg ambush in County Tipperary, which was carried out by members of the 3rd Tipperary Brigade of the IRA, the name by which members of the Irish Volunteers were becoming more commonly known. This ambush resulted in the deaths of 2 RIC constables and is often thought of as the opening shots of this War of Independence. Now, throughout 1919, the IRA were engaged primarily in arms raids against the RIC in an attempt to equip themselves with weapons, but also to neutralise the police force. Michael Collins at this point in time was combining his role as a cabinet minister with being president of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, as well as director of intelligence of the IRA. As director of intelligence, Collins developed a highly sophisticated intelligence and counterintelligence network and made excellent use of double agents working from within the British administration in Dublin. Collins also makes effective use of his squad, this hand-picked team of assassins tasked with eliminating Crown agents operating in Dublin at this time. In this regard, the squad develops a reputation for being highly ruthless and incredibly efficient. Boycotting and harassment of the Royal Irish Constabulary resulted in mass resignations from the police force. In a bid to reinforce their depleted ranks, a massive recruitment drive was carried out in 1920. Ex-soldiers and ex-officers who'd served in the British Army during the First World War were brought to Ireland, were made temporary constables within the Royal Irish Constabulary, and because of uniform shortages, wore a combination of dark police uniforms and khaki military uniforms, leading to the nickname the Black and Tans. The auxiliaries were ex-officers who served in the British Army, and they were tasked with taking the fight directly to the IRA during this period. They regularly carried out patrols and raids on members of the civilian population, and multiple accounts from the period attribute beatings, floggings, torture, and the shooting of unarmed civilians to the auxiliaries. Now, what's really interesting here is that because we often use this umbrella term of black and tan to refer to both groups, it kind of obscures the fact that some of the worst acts during this period were carried out by the auxiliaries. The introduction of these new recruits really serves to escalate the conflict throughout 1920, a year which sees a marked increase in violence and activity. In rural areas, the IRA organises itself into flying columns, lightly armed groups of IRA volunteers which ambush and assassinate members of the Crown forces. They also engage in sabotage, disrupting communications, attacking barracks, and destroying bridges.
The British atrocities were reported around the world, and the government came under extreme pressure. In Ireland, the infrastructure of the country had been severely damaged, and the Irish Republican Army were running out of munitions. Both sides finally agreed a truce in the summer of 1921. Under the direction of Eamon de Valera, the Dáil chose the group to represent Ireland at the talks, which included Collins. Knowing the difficulties that lay ahead, Collins was initially reluctant to participate, but eventually relented.
Collins and other members of the delegation are termed envoys plenipotentiaries. From an official point of view, this gives them full authority to negotiate and sign a treaty. They are, however, instructed to report back to the cabinet in Dublin throughout the negotiating process. The British delegation at this time comprised far more experienced diplomats and negotiators, and included political veterans such as David Lloyd George, Austen Chamberlain, Lord Birkenhead, and Winston Churchill. After 2 months of discussions, the treaty is eventually signed on the 6th of December 1921. The Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921 creates a parliament in Dublin with full economic and legislative autonomy. However, it maintains partition of the island of Ireland, with 6 northeastern counties remaining part of the UK pending a boundary commission. As a member of the Commonwealth, Irish TDs are also obliged to swear an oath of allegiance to the King of England. The oath of allegiance was the main point of contention in the treaty, with opposition becoming quite clear in the Dáil. The Parliament fragments as TDs debate the pros and cons of accepting the treaty. Michael Collins fully believed in his own stepping stone argument. He said, "In my opinion, the treaty gives us the freedom, not the ultimate freedom that all nations desire and develop to, but the freedom to achieve it." After these highly intense and emotional treaty debates, the agreement was ultimately passed by a margin of just 7 votes, 57 opposed and 64 in favour.
The treaty created a split within Sinn Féin and within the people of Ireland. The pro-treaty Free State group supported the decision, and the anti-treaty group, led by De Valera, opposed it. Although the treaty was finally passed in the Dáil, In April 1922, a group of anti-treaty Republicans forced their way into the forecourts in Dublin. Collins did not want a civil war and hoped they would surrender, but soon his worst fears were realised and the country fell into civil war. Family and friends who had fought together during the War of Independence now found themselves on opposite sides. By the summer, the Free State group controlled Dublin, and Collins had been appointed Commander-in-Chief. The Civil War was fought out in the provinces. The anti-treaty Republican Army were forced into the countryside and remote areas, where they adopted guerrilla tactics and sabotage. It was during the Civil War period, in August 1922, that Michael Collins decided to make a trip to West Cork. He may have been trying to negotiate a ceasefire in the area, or trying to recover anti-treaty funds. Although much of the region was held by anti-treaty Republicans, on the 22nd of August, Collins and his group left Cork early in the morning, visiting Bandon and then going on to Clonakilty, where he met with family and friends.
Collins set out from the Imperial Hotel in Cork City on the morning of the 22nd of August 1922, shortly after 6 a.m, and headed west towards Macroom. The convoy consisted of a motorcycle scout in front, a Crossley tender carrying 13 soldiers, Collins being driven in a Leland Straight 8 touring car, and an armoured car, the Sliabh na Mban. From Macroom, the convoy headed towards Bandon, stopping along the way at Bailnablaw, a small rural crossroads where they asked for directions outside of Long's pub. Unfortunately, the man they asked was an anti-treaty IRA scout, with a meeting of anti-treaty IRA officers planned to take place nearby that very day. The anti-treaty IRA could not allow a convoy carrying pro-treaty National Army soldiers to pass through their territory unchallenged. As a result, the decision was taken to lay an ambush at Bailnablaw on the off chance that the convoy returned by the same route. The convoy itself continued its journey westward, travelling to Clonakilty and Skibbereen. The convoy stopped at the Four Alls pub near Michael's birthplace, where they enjoyed some refreshments, and Michael had the opportunity to meet with some relatives and friends before continuing their journey back to Cork City. The anti-treaty IRA at this point had been lying in wait all day. Many of the volunteers who had been tasked with carrying out the ambush had been stood down and sent back to Long's pub at Bailnablaw. Having met with officers in Bandon, Collins's convoy journeyed through Bailnablaw at approximately 7:30 p.m. When they arrived, there was only a handful of volunteers left who had been tasked with removing the mine and dray cart from the road, which had been serving as a blockade. The anti-treaty volunteers opened fire from the hillside on Collins's convoy. Collins's aide-de-camp claimed that he instructed their driver to quote-unquote drive like hell, but was overruled by his commander-in-chief, who told the driver to stop and that the convoy would get out and fight their attackers. Estimates of the ambush vary from 20 to 45 minutes. But what we do know is that the Vickers gun, the machine gun on the armoured car, the Sliabh na Mban, had the anti-treaty IRA pinned down on the hilltop. When this gun jammed, this allowed the anti-treaty IRA to retreat. And this is when Collins left the cover of the armoured car in pursuit of the anti-treaty IRA and was subsequently shot and killed by a bullet wound to the head.
Collins' body lay in state in Dublin for 3 days before his burial. Thousands of people lined the streets to watch his funeral cortege as it travelled slowly to his final resting place in Glasnevin Cemetery. In the weeks and months afterwards, there was much speculation and rumour about Collins' death.
It's been said that some people shape revolutions and that others are shaped by them. Michael Collins certainly shaped the Irish Revolution. Now, he could not, of course, do this alone. He needed the ordinary men and women. He needed them to provide funds, to provide safe houses, and to provide information. He also needed the ordinary rank and file of the IRA, the men who fought and many of whom died for the cause. What Collins did do was devote his considerable energy to both the political and military wings of the revolution. In addition to all of this, Collins also laid the foundations for post-war Ireland. Collins was an incredibly effective organiser and administrator rather than this big fellow type folk hero that he can often be presented as. And more than anything, he seemed to possess an insatiable work ethic, working marathon long hours and sleeping very little. The dramatic and untimely death of this young, handsome, charismatic leader continues to inspire interest in Collins. In the end, Michael Collins devoted his life to the cause of Irish freedom, and ultimately he gave his life for that cause.
Time and again, Collins proved his skill as an administrator and in his understanding of finance and economics. He had intuitive political understanding and was a strong speaker who could deliver his ideas to the large crowds who came to hear him. His loss was felt very deeply at the time, and his stature in the creation of the Irish Free State and the myths surrounding him have continued to grow.